Good morning everyone. Welcome to this meeting of the Dunedin City Council. Welcome to councillors, to staff, to the public and to the media. We have one apology from Councillor Mike Lord. I'll move from the chair that that apology be accepted. Second, Councillor Staines. All those in favour please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. I'll further move from the chair that for the duration of this meeting, which at the moment is scheduled for 3 days, that we suspend the standing order requiring speakers to stand. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Wilson, I thought, since it's your suggestion, I thought you might second that. All those in favour please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. I'll move to the chair that the agenda be confirmed with the note that the reports that we received yesterday, 6Q to 6X, will be considered last due to obviously the fact that they've arrived late and give everyone time to absorb them. So with that note, second to Councillor Staines, I confirm the agenda. All those in favour please say aye. Aye. Carried. Right, item 3. We now move over to the Chief Executive and my overview, and I'll start by inviting the Chief Executive to give us her.
So I'll just take you through the bundle of information that you've all spent Christmas wading your way through. The last 3 years since the last LTP, you'll recall, some of you, that at the last LTP we went through the budget and took out every area of new capital expenditure, and where that new capital expenditure was an increase in levels of service, and we presented to the community a budget that maintained existing levels of service and went out and consulted were there any of those new levels of service that the community wanted to add back in. And the reason for that was to start a process of reducing the level of rates rises that had been become common in preceding years. We still had, we're completing Toitu, we were still completing the town hall, and we were still completing the stadium at that point in time. So some of that spending was committed and still to come, but it was to slow down or stop the process of accumulating new debt before we started to pay off some of the old debt. So the last LTP focused really strongly on constraining debt and on, as a council, living within our means. Those things are still priorities for this LTP, and what you've got here is a budget that shows existing levels of service being maintained. Ideas and thoughts about new levels of service are all contained in the set of reports that you have for your discussion and prioritisation. And in keeping with the last LTP, these reports don't have staff recommendations, so we don't say we recommend you add this one or not this one. We say these are all things for your consideration. That's, I guess that's quite a change in the way that we've done things in the past here at the council. At the same time though, this is a 10-year plan. At the moment, the way the plan is shaped up, the budget, the financial strategy has assumed that the $30 million transfer from the stadium, we had a plan to reach a $200 million debt level by 2021. The financial strategy currently still allows us, the financial strategy says we now have to reach $230 million by 2021. This is the draft financial strategy. The budgets, on the other hand, because they have no new capital expenditure, no new capital expenditure that involves increasing levels of service, the budgets, in fact, get you to $200 million, which is that original target, by the year after 2021. So that last 3 years of constraining new capital expenditure does have a flow on for the next 10 years, and part of your job is to say whereabouts between that 200 and $230 million was, do you want to end up, or in fact any other number that you choose, because this is a draft financial strategy and you get to set it. At the same time, looking forward to what kind of city do you want this to be, and what kind of things are you delivering for the community. And that's the job of the next 10 days, is to come up with a draft to put out, for the next 3 days, draft to put out for consultation. There's quite a bit of new legislative requirements this time, and so the process has been somewhat different, and certainly the document we put out for consultation will be very different to previous years, that we don't have to put a full draft LTP out for consultation, although we will make it available. The consultation document itself will be quite a lot more detailed than in previous years. And there will probably still be a need to have the summary that we've been doing. So it's a process that's supposed to make it simplified for us. What in fact it does is mean we have to produce an additional document to those that we already prepare. So the key challenges were maintaining the current levels of service, incorporating the outcome of the stadium review into the budgets. So I'm sure most of you have this etched in your mind, but the requirement, if the stadium continues to operate, it's about $1.8 million a year, 1.5% on rates. And that gives a budget that is that is a sustainable budget for them, and taking $30 million of their budget, putting that into our budget so that they have a debt to equity ratio that's appropriate for the stadium, and they have a budget that is realistic for them to operate within. So that's where the stadium review got to as a recommendation. You remember that DCHL came to us perhaps about a year ago and said that they were not going to be having a dividend outside of the subvention payment. Don't forget there is a subvention payment, and there's money from the companies that pays our shareholder advance. So we are still getting about $16 million from the companies. We're not getting nothing, but the dividend that usually is used to offset the rates, $4.5 million last year, is gone this year and next. And at this point in time, we haven't started to factor in when that may return. We've done some loose modelling in when that may be, but it's a little bit hard to guess, and we have tried to give you a budget that errs on the side of being conservative to give you room to move. So this LTP sets out your plan for Dunedin for the next 10 years, the business as usual plan, the existing levels of service plan. If you want to reduce levels of service, now's the time to ask for that, and we'll work out what that might save. If you want to increase levels of service, there's some reports that give you things that you've asked for to consider over this period of time that have come up in the last year. And of course, at the next stage of this, we go into public submissions where the public come and talk to you about things that they'd like you to either stop doing or start doing, but that's the next step in the process. This year you have to review the financial strategy, and for the first time you have a 30-year infrastructure strategy as well, part of the new legal requirements, and you've got that to look at as well. And part of your job is to make sure that the financial strategy, that is the commitments you're making financially, are reflected in the infrastructure strategy, but also in those levels of service that you set. Those things need to all tie together. What you'll see in the infrastructure strategy, and you will see this reflected in the budgets, is we have had deferred renewals in the area of water, and for the last 3 years there is a plan in place to systematically start stepping that up, and that has begun. It's been forecasted, it's been planned, but this next 3 years you really start to see the effect of that playing catch up with some of the water renewals, if you like, starting to take effect. We've managed the delays, but the period of managing the delays is really past. We actually need to start catching up with those deferrals, and so you'll see that starting to happen in this LTP, throughout the period of this LTP. A reminder of the strategic framework. With the reports that you've got here, the team worked most of yesterday under Nicola's guidance and have gone through all of this set of reports, all of the new levels of service, and have done a rough assessment of each. It's a bit rough and ready, to be fair, because this is an art as much as a science, but have done as a team, have had a discussion with the report writers and have done an assessment as to how each of these new levels of service, each of these new things, delivers against each of the strategies. So later on in the morning, they'll give you something that says Mosgiel Pool, cycleways, Portobello Road, whatever the option might be, City of Literature, how does it deliver against all 8 of those strategies? And it might be either high, medium, low, strong, medium or weak, or actively goes against some of the principles of the strategies. And that's just to assist you in your decision making. And a reminder about the purpose of local government: to enable democratic local decision making and action by and on behalf of your communities, and to meet the current and future needs of this community for good quality local infrastructure, local public services and performance of regulatory functions in a way that's most cost effective for households and businesses. So this is where we are currently. As I said before, we've taken a business as usual approach. Your budgets have no increased levels of service, no new things, other than things that you already decided to put in previous years. And we were working towards a 3% maximum rates rise as per the last financial strategy. We got to about 2.2%, and that was even taking into consideration the loss of the dividend, so that's been achieved by internal savings. But on top of that, we've had to add in the $1.8 million requirement for the stadium, or you have to consider the $1.8 million requirement for the stadium and whether you want to pay that, which takes us to 3.7% at this point in time. As I say, with no new levels of service, with no new facilities for next year. I just want to point out, you've got the inflation-adjusted rates increase for the next 2 years in the budgets that you're given of 5.5 and 4.2%. Just a reminder that we have to produce those inflation-adjusted figures. In the last LTP, our inflation-adjusted figures for our years, you saw we were heading and we wanted to get 5, 4 and 3, and our budget declared 11.9, 7.6 and 5.4, and we managed to get to that 5, 4 and 3 by a systematic process of taking out the inflation adjustments where they weren't needed and so on. And we will of course go through that process again, so the 5.5 and 4.2 shouldn't be too alarming. This is a fairly common the prediction for our years has an inflation adjustment that in the past we have tended not to have to fully meet, and so it's closer to the 3% that the current financial strategy dictates than it looks. And that was the budget parameters that were given to the staff. So zero-based review of the capital expenditure, existing service levels only, the same with operating expenditure, wherever possible to absorb those cost increases and to absorb the inflation adjustments. So the vast bulk of what we put together, we said wasn't going to have an inflation adjustment, and to maintain service levels. Unless you decide you want to reduce service levels, they still are in the budget at this point in time. And the commitment, as a result of work done after the last LTP, when there was some concern, some of our fees went up by considerably more than our rates were going to go up. There was a discussion around the table that we need to be very careful that there isn't a temptation to, when money is tight and rates are only going to go up by 3%, to put up fees by 5% to bridge the gap rather than working hard to make the savings. So the instruction to staff was a maximum fee increase of 3%. And last year and the year before, a number of fees that didn't increase have increased, but this time, but as I say, by a maximum of 3%. So the rates rise and the fee rise won't be out of step again. The commitments to keep those, the fee rise won't be able to be above the level of the rates rise. The new financial strategy, which Grant will talk you through when he gets here. Oh, he's here, thank goodness. It's a relief. But then outline the financial strategy, proposing a continuation of that 3% rates rise unless there's exceptional circumstances, the debt to get below 330 million, so that's the effectively this just follows at this point in time. It's a continuation of the last financial strategy very closely, except that the 30 million from the stadium is now added, and as I say, the budget itself is actually considerably better than this because there's nothing new in the budget at this point in time. In the financial strategy at a glance on page 4.1, you can get a summary of that. And this meeting lets us know whether you want us to make changes to that financial strategy before we go and consult with the community, so whether you want changes in the draft. Paying down of debt remains a major focus. So last year, for the first time in more than a dozen years at this council, the council, right across the council and the group of companies, we paid off more debt than we took on. And getting there is a bit like turning the Queen Mary. It isn't something you can really do overnight. And it is a good achievement, but it does need ongoing, consistent application of the principle that you've continued to state, which is that you were worried about the continuing escalation of debt in reflection of your community's worries, and that's still a focus in this plan at this point. The debt levels are high, and there's the second highest in the country. But our asset levels are also high, the second highest in the country. So the $1 billion worth of council companies that our forefathers had the wisdom to invest in have given us an asset level that is high, very high by New Zealand standards. And about 2/3 of our group debt does sit, or a little over, does sit within those companies. However, we are looking to improve the debt ratios right across the 10 years of the plan. And across the bottom there you can see the plan as it currently sits, that's the gross debt. So the total council debt, even with the additional $30 million, will be at this point in time $146 million by 2024. They're the major changes in the funding. There's the reduction in revenue that we've had to factor in this year, $8.2 million over this period of time. As I say, the reduction of the SHL dividend, we are having a reduced FAR rate from NZTA. So there's a percent extra this coming year, and then it reduces by 1% a year for about 10 years. So we will be receiving the Metro FAR rate, even though we have a huge acreage of rural roading. We don't qualify for the higher level of FAR rate that most of the rural councils achieved, and there's a cost to that. We either need to talk about our ratepayers making up the difference, or doing less in the transport space, or probably some combination of the two. And there's a brief summary of the infrastructure strategy, but we'll be talking about that a little later, so I won't go into too much detail. But the key points, again, business as usual approach, but more emphasis on improving the renewals of infrastructure, particularly in water. And so the budget steps up that level of renewal funding. And renewal funding is rates funded, it's not loan funded, it's not funded by external parties.
Thank you, Chief. The Chief's comments derived from her memorandum on pages 1.1 to 1.25. Thank you. So I'll move from the chair that memorandum be noted. Second to Councillor Staines. Discussion. I'll put it for those Councillors.
The talk of levels of service by the Chief Executive and throughout the whole document, in fact, seems to suggest that there is kind of a one-to-one relationship between levels of service and staff numbers. And I'm wondering, given that, as the Chief Executive has said, they've taken out all the new areas of capital expenditure, why it is that we still maintain very high staff numbers that were required to do all the major projects like the stadium, town hall, art gallery, all these sorts of things. So in terms of trying to stop accumulating new debt, I have a couple of questions. One of them is talk of levels of service being maintained. does it necessarily follow, in the view of the Chief Executive and staff, that we also have to maintain our very expensive staff numbers that are currently costing us over $100 million a year? So I'm wondering if that could be addressed perhaps now by the Chief Executive, since it's an overview thing that has been touched on.
Staffing numbers are currently about 7.5% below what they were 3 years ago when we had all of those projects on the go. Obviously, our staff don't build stadia or town halls or toitu, but they administer contracts and oversee and look after the budgets. So, so staffing numbers have come down. There are no further reductions in major expenditure plans, so any further reductions in staffing numbers come about by efficiency gains or by doing things differently. There's, in this budget, there are actually a small number of extra areas of staffing where there's some determination that it's cheaper to do things in-house than it is to continue to purchase them externally. So, for example, we will be hiring in-house legal counsel because of the amount of money that we spend externally on lawyers. We think we can save by having a better internal oversight of the way we seek legal opinions, and we think sometimes an internal lawyer will be able to give us an answer quickly that we don't need to pay $5,000 for. So that's an example. There's also some increasing staffing in the area of risk and audit, and there's also increasing staffing because of the escalation of the water renewals. So to answer your question, the staffing numbers have come down by about 7.5%, from a high of about 687 or thereabouts to about 645 to 650 FTEs, full-time staff.
Okay, thank you. You say that the staff numbers have come down, and it seems to me that the calculation of those staff numbers, depending on whether you counted FTEs or part-time staff or whatever, that tended to be a bit of a moving feast anyway. What I've noticed in terms of the actual cost to the ratepayer is that staff costs have inexorably kept rising, despite the fact that we have had significant drops in capital expenditure, and I would have thought the necessity to have so many staff.
So the staff costs aren't over $100 million a year. You'll be pleased to know the staff costs are about $45 million a year. Roughly.
I was talking about the entire cost of the bureaucracy, which I believe you told me was about $110 million.
That's the entire amount of the rate take. So the entire amount of the rate take is about $110 million.
I'm trying to figure out whether you consider staff costs just to be salaries, or whether you consider staff costs to be salaries plus computers, offices, and all the infrastructure that goes with that.
No, I haven't got a figure for that amount. Sorry, Councillor, I'm sure we could pull one together. But
if you could, I'd very much appreciate it.
45 odd million is salary costs.
It's salary costs, I understood that. Thank you.
And there are wage rounds. We have unions, staff. Every year we negotiate annual wage rounds with staff. So last year there was a $400,000 increase, I think, in the staffing budget last year, which represented a little bit under 1%. The wage rise was in fact larger than that, but we had some efficiencies and some staffing reductions which offset that increase, and that was similar the year before. There's a bigger staff increase coming this year, because we budget in advance for anticipated wage round based on what we what we're told that the increase is likely to be. But also there's been a 3-year program to systematically get staff on a fair and reasonable grading system, which we haven't had in the past, and there's about a bit under 1.5% in the budget for that as well.
Okay, but it is true that staff costs, whether you consider just the salaries or the entire staff cost, have continued to keep rising, despite the fact that we've cut back severely on capital expenditure.
Yeah, I think every year they have continued to rise, but the staff numbers have decreased, and if they hadn't, they would have risen considerably faster than they did.
Thank you.
Well, there's no further discussion. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Now, I'd like to share my overview. I'd like to put this in this meeting and the decision we have to make in the context from the point of view of the council making the decisions today, and some of this will overlap with what the Chief has said. It seems to me there are two main parts to the context for considering the LTP and the annual plan. The first is our strategic framework, which expresses our community direction and aspiration. That's been developed, consulted, confirmed as policy over about the same period. Everything we do or consider doing ideally should be measured against our strategic frameworks. That's what we've decided where we want to go. And I note that staff, as the Chief indicated, have put together an analysis measuring proposals for extra spending against the council strategies. So that's the positive part of the context in a sense. The second part of the context for this meeting is the financial strategy, which includes, as has been mentioned, a number of imperatives or requirements. These are constraints as opposed to positives, I guess, or as opposed to aspirations. Council debt down to 230 million by 2021-22, the 3% rate rise cap, reduced DCHL dividends, no new capital spending. And over the past 4 years, staff have been asked to find savings and efficiencies to address those imperatives, and consistently over the last 4 years they have delivered and achieved those. And I note that in some of the budgets that we received in our Christmas pack, that already the reducing council debt is having a positive effect on several council departmental cash flows. It was noted that their costs had dropped, so that's having a positive effect. This year, the council has to decide on both the annual budget and the long-term plan for the next decade. And it was always going to be difficult to balance our need to maintain progress towards council strategic goals and on the one hand, and our financial constraints on the other. However, as the Chief has mentioned, a further challenging factor was added when Council decided to take across $30 million of DVL debt for the stadium following the review. Now, it's important to understand that that doesn't change the overall group debt position. But among other things, it made staff's task in meeting the demands of the financial strategy a little more difficult. But staff have come back with a budget and an LTP that very nearly meets all the demands of the financial strategy and its time frames. However, that rigorous discipline in meeting or nearly meeting those requirements has implications for Council's choices in achieving its strategic aims going forward. And this is Council's first opportunity to see what those implications are for the next 10 years and see them all in one place and adjust things if that's felt to be necessary. First, a couple of observations. Essentially, the projections that fall out of rigorously applying the financial strategy allow almost no room for any developmental investment of any kind beyond what was already included, and that's investment whether it's economic, community, infrastructure or whatever. And secondly, we need to appreciate that the costs of providing council services inevitably rise, and the Chief has already touched on that with regards to salaries. But there is an inexorable increase in costs over time, and in addition to that, more and more demands and impositions are laid on councils by central government to do more. We get more tasks given to us every year, and we obviously have to resource those. So even if all the savings and efficiencies are found that are possible, rates will rise in money, if not in real terms. But if council and the community want new things, Mosgiel Pool, a revamped city centre, increased economic development, investment or whatever, then it is an extra cost on top of the normal expected rates rise. It's not included in it. We expect to pay a bit more each year to maintain our house as paint prices rise. It's called inflation. But if we put on an extra bedroom, we expect to go out and get some more capital to do it. It's on top of our maintenance costs, and it's the same with rates. But that, of course, when you add those two together, raises the affordability issue. And this and previous terms, the previous term council has been very conscious of that, and hence the rate rise limits in the financial strategy. So our considerations and discussions over the next few days are the opportunity not just to decide what to add and what not to our spending, but also to weigh up the main parameters or variables expressed or implicit in our financial strategy. And as I've mentioned, these are the limits on rate rises, repaying debt within a finite time frame, and extremely limited DCHL dividend payments, and weighing those against the need to further the aims of our strategic framework, and decide whether over the next 10-year period, the period of our LTP, we're able to get the balance into the optimum position that we'd like. My observation is that the 10-year time frame is important and gives us opportunities not offered by just a 12-month budgetary time frame perspective. And those opportunities include the possibility of smoothing or shifting costs across several years and of planning for a recovery of DCHL dividends over time. Basically, the opportunity of having the time to balance constraints and aspirations without having to emphasise unreasonably one over the other in a very short term, i.e. an annual budget. We'll consider the big financial picture when we get to our draft financial strategy in section 4. And we'll look at whether there are ways within the 10-year time frame to adjust the constraints from year to year, but still roughly achieve the 10-year aims. And to that end, I've requested from our finance staff some additional projections around the resumption, albeit modest, of DCHL dividends. The current hiatus in dividends is to allow the council companies to invest in both overdue renewals and new infrastructure in order to resume enhanced dividends in the future. So we should expect some dividends to be forthcoming at the latest in the second half of the 10-year plan. That's what we have the investments for. Also, what would be the implications if the repayment of the $30 million stadium debt were to be altered within the 10-year period and beyond? Now, I note, as the Chief indicated, that while the financial strategy simply adds the $30 million to the debt limit at 2021-22, the LTP assumes it to be paid off at the same rate as would have been the case by DVL. There's a discrepancy here in that the removal of that might free up some resource in the first years of the LTP. And later on, when we get to the financial strategy, I'll ask Mr. McKenzie to explain that difference and its implications when we get to that financial strategy section. Finally, I'd just like to point out that in this meeting, what we're doing is developing a draft long-term plan and annual budget for the consideration of our community. So this is not the final decision. What I would like to see is council come to agreement on what parameters it wants in the financial strategy in the first instance, but also what we feel by agreement should go in the plan. Then we ask the community what they think about that. And we make the final decision in May after we've listened to our community. And on that note, can I urge the community to look at what we're deciding over the next 3 days and come back to us with their views. That's all from me in the meantime. So, Councillor Cowan.
With your analogy about your house, and if we want to add an extra room, I'm wondering whether any thought has been given by our council staff to whether we need the size house we have, and not only the possibility of adding a room, but the possibility of downsizing to a smaller house. There's two sides to that equation. Has the other side been looked at?
I'm not absolutely sure I understand what you're asking.
If what you're asking is, has there been consideration to reducing levels of service? What we've done is we've given you a budget that maintains the existing. So everything we do now is still in the budget. If you want us to do less economic development, less community development, less policy preparation, less work in dog control, then this is the time to ask for that, and we'll go back and tell you what will be the rates reduction from having a smaller house.
No, the question was the adding the extra room rather than the service level. So the new capital expenditure is being thought on by us, but is...
No, I'm sorry, I didn't explain it enough. I was just using that as an analogy. If you want extra things, whether they're services or whether they're rooms or whether they're capital, you pay for them on top of what you're already doing. That's my point, not that it was a capital expense. Sorry. Right. Councillor Dizzy.
Yeah, just a further question. These possible options, this is something that you're suggesting, I presume. And when you say increase DCHL dividend at a rate of 1 million per annum from year 3 until the previous level reached, I mean, where do you get that figure from? I mean, why not 2 million or 3? I mean, how is it you expect this to happen?
It is simply a tentative projection, but probably no less or more well-founded than the projection that there will be no dividend in year 10. The point I was making is that we have the investments to provide a dividend, and if we are looking at a 10-year time frame and there are no dividends, then we have to ask ourselves why we have the investments in the first place. So I put that in, but I've asked the staff just to give us some rough projections, because I think that we know we have the investments to provide a dividend, and we should be able to expect to budget for them at some point.
It's an interesting way of doing it.
Councillor McTavish.
Just one further question, and that is whether we might expect, or whether we could expect to have some comment from the chair of DCHL in relation to that, just so that we know, I mean, if it's patently not realistic, then it would be good to know now, so that we can make some other decisions.
We were in discussion with him yesterday, so Grant will be able to talk to that.
Thank you.
Councillor Banks.
You said just now regarding DCHL that given that we have a large investment in the companies that we can expect over time or after 10 years to have seen a significant return. You said that after a few years we would have to ask the question, why haven't we seen a significant return on that? My question is, why, given the enormous investment that we have in the companies, why we aren't asking that question now? Why is it we are not getting that return now?
Well, they've told us that, and they've told us that over the previous few years, up till about 3 years ago, they were being expected to provide higher dividends than they could actually afford. We all know that. They were bled. And that meant that they couldn't invest in renewals to the extent that they needed to or should have. They are now playing catch-up.
My question is, why were they being bled, as you put it, when in fact most of the dividends that we received would have been reasonable dividends as returns given the investment that we have in the companies? My question really is, why is it that DCHL has not performed up to a commercial standard in terms of the enormous ratepayer investment that's been put into the companies? Why is it that they have had to, in fact, misrepresent what they were giving to us as profits when, in fact, they were often borrowing them? And why is it that that underperformance hasn't been really addressed?
Well, you're making an assumption about underperformance, which is a judgment you're entitled to make, but not necessarily everyone would agree with it. And it's a statement of opinion, not fact, so I'm not going to bother trying to answer it. Councillor Thompson.
Well, it's really just to note that some of the issues that you've raised, plus some others along a similar vein, I have foreshadowed, I am foreshadowing, and I've provided Pam a motion that I will put in after the Chief Financial Officer has addressed the financial strategy, which may enable us to address some of those issues that you've raised, if that helps.
Thank you. Councillor Green.
It's just a comment with regards to our discussion around DCHL, and I appreciate that Grant isn't sitting in front of us, or Mr Crombie, but it's probably worth noting that when you refer to the dividend, you're referring to the 4.5 that has disappeared and the recovery of some of that 4.5.
Exactly.
You're not referring to the subvention payment that comes through. So we are receiving a return on our investment other than just the dividend. I just wanted to make that point.
No, I take the point, and the Chief referred to that. We are getting a subvention payment, and we're getting interest on a shareholder advance already. So it's not disappeared entirely.
Thank you.
Councillor Wilson.
I was going to raise questions. I just want to flag now, because you've raised it, that I see this as an opportunity, if we were to get the $1 million in, that we don't just look at it as a contribution to reduce rates or for other development, but we actually look at our frustration we've had in the past with the Waipori Fund being deemed dividend paid forward rather than backwards, and the opportunity to consider a different way of dealing with that and the DCHL dividend itself, that we wouldn't be taking it in the first year but in the second year with some assurance that it will be there, because that's been our frustration for years, and I hope that we don't hold too much hope on getting it too quickly.
Well, I think that's a good point, and in that regard I should point out that it's an ambition of DCHL's board to achieve, if you like, a reserve which enables them to be able to predict the dividend they pay consistently every year, rather than wait until the end of the year and decide, well, we're doing this much, we can pay it, so that we can budget, so council can budget ahead and project ahead, which is exactly what would be our ambition as well. So it's the same. Right, now we'll move on to the community board issues, item 4, and can I invite Steve Walker, Chair of Chalmers Community Board, to welcome, Steve. Where it is.
Microphone, are you on? It seems so. Okay, Mayor, Councillors, good morning and Happy New Year. And as a gesture of goodwill for the new year, and just to prove that there's more to Dunedin's West Harbour than the humble sycamore, I brought along some organic cherries from my back garden in Port Chalmers, which I will now hand.
15? One each, is it?
Thankfully, my board isn't here. One each, and they're not poisoned. Yeah. Okay, I'll assume obviously you've read the long-term plan meeting notes that the board has presented, so I won't labour my way through every point, but I'll just highlight a few important issues within a few of the items. For many years now we've talked about the completion of the cycle walkway from its current point at St Leonard's through to Port Chalmers, and I know the agencies are all working extremely hard to get this progressed all the way, so I just urge councillors and the council to keep working closely with the NZTA to make sure that it is completed and hopefully see some progress this year. Second item is the 30-kilometre speed limit in George Street in Port Chalmers, obviously centre of probably one of the most beautiful historical towns in New Zealand. Last year we had a very successful trial for a 3-month period, reducing traffic speeds to 30 kilometres. It was universally welcomed by the community and businesses, This year, the board put together a plan to reintroduce the speed limit, and after a slight oversight by the NZTA, it didn't go. It's going in tomorrow, I believe, but there's been quite a delay. And I think because of the reaction to the delay within the community, I think it's really highlighted how important this issue is. So again, I just urge council and councillors to keep lobbying the NZTA to try and look to make this a permanent feature in Port Chalmers. I think it will be universally welcomed. Item 3, facilities. Obviously, the Port Chalmers pool remains a very important facility. I know it's well supported. I'd like to see that continued, obviously. And the Port Chalmers Library is very much the centre of our community. And there's a new item on there, I think, that really needs to be highlighted and addressed, and that's the rugby pitch down at Watson Park. It's been slowly neglected for many years. It's in a terrible state. It floods, it's bumpy, and at the moment I know the rugby club are working in partnership with Harbourside football clubs to bring the football clubs to the pitch as well. So there's been a very a joyous community desire to see this happen. So the St Leonard's pitch, I don't know if any of you are aware of it, is in a horrific state, pretty much never used during the football playing months. So I'd like to see council really commit to improving the situation down at Watson Park so it can really become centre of the community. Now just go on to item 6, it's seawalls. Obviously the outer communities, particularly Carey's Bay through to Deborah Bay, Dowling Bay, Waipuna Bay, Te Naru, right out to Aramoana, very much depend on the integrity of the seawalls. There were some great improvements carried out there about 3-4 years ago. They came to a stop, and I did bring this up last year, and pretty much there's been no update on what's happening to the seawall upgrades during the last year. So I'd really like to see some financial commitment to this, because obviously if they're left to degrade and there's a catastrophic event, the cost of repairing the road that services the outer communities will be extremely expensive. Number 8 is sycamore tree control. Again, an issue that's been raised time and time again through the community board. And last year, thanks actually to the advocacy of Councillor McTavish, we started to initiate get some progress on trying to draw up a sycamore plan for the West Harbour. And in December, after a year of trying, Lisa Wheeler, in conjunction with David Blair, came up with a small plan. But great having the plan, all looks wonderful, but I really would like to see some commitment to progressing this year, because it's, again, something as a board chair I get a lot of feedback on. And over the years I've welcomed councillors to come and visit the former Port Chalmers town belt, which once was a haven of native flora and now is pretty much a sea of sycamores. Number 9, safety around schools. Thankfully within our West Harbour communities most schools are very safe within their immediate confines. There's one anomaly, that's a Sawyers-based school, and we've been working in conjunction with the school for a long time to get a simple speed ramp put outside on the main road, which is extremely dangerous. The principal of the school has reported that some cars are going 70-80 k's past the school, even though their safety warning flags are out. The board has committed funding to this. The school is prepared to raise money towards this, and all we're looking for now is a little bit more from council. I think we're talking about $1,000, so it's really is chicken feed. And finally, I just want to talk very briefly about number 11. Well done, obviously, on Dunedin being successful and becoming Gigatown. That will be a great benefit to institutions in the central city, but I really would like to see some commitment from council to make sure that, again, the outer communities are not forgotten, and perhaps some advocacy in trying to speed up fibre optic networks out to areas like Port Chalmers, etc. Yes, are expedited, and I am more than welcome to take your questions.
Questions, councillors? Councillor Newton.
Thanks, Steve, for the board submission. Just a query about Watson Park, and I know that you and I have been involved there, but is it worth sharing the importance of that green space to the wider community in light of there are no other alternatives in terms of a green space, proximity to the school, etc.?
Sorry, Sandy sneaking behind me. Yes, Andrew, absolutely. I mean, it's to be honest, in the whole West Harbour area, it really probably remains the only green sporting facility. I mean, you've been up to the St Leonard's pitch with me, and it's completely unusable. So yes, absolutely.
And the same for Watson Park.
Sorry? For Watson Park, yes, absolutely. That's one. Yeah.
Thank you very much for that, Steve. The Sycamore plan that you raised just now, I haven't had the benefit of seeing it. I'm wondering, I know that there is quite a demand for free firewood in the Port Chalmers area, and also that sycamore is one of the very few trees which actually burns well green because of the oil in it. I'm wondering if there has been any suggestion in the Sycamore plan that some way of encouraging the public of Port Chalmers to be able to access Sycamore directly for firewood, if that was able to be made possible. I understand there's always health and safety as an issue, and as Stephen Fry said, health and safety are the two most dangerous words in the English language. But is there any suggestion that the sycamores could be made available for firewood? Because to me that would be one of the quickest ways of actually, at very low cost, getting them removed.
There's not. I should probably clarify what the plan is. The plan is simply an identification of the problem areas at the moment. So what I would like to see now is there are plans for myself and the board to sit down with Lisa Wheeler to take the plan forward. So at the moment it's just an identification of problem areas. So when the plan is written, absolutely I think that should be part of a plan. I think everything should be on the table. And for me, anything that resolves the problem, if it's for firewood, that gets rid of the problem will satisfy us. Yeah, but at the moment it's just an identification of problem areas.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any further questions, councillors? Thank you, Steve.
Okay, thanks.
Amazing cherries.
Sorry?
Amazing cherries.
Great cherries.
I think we may have made a omission in not having number 14 on there, though. I didn't get one. Right. Mr. Feather from Mosgiel Community. Welcome. Bill.
Well, good morning, councillors, and likewise a happy new year to you all. I trust this forthcoming year is going to be progressive and quite fruitful. Firstly, I'd just like to declare an interest that I have with the Facilities Trust, the Tari Facilities Trust and the swimming pool. I attend their trustee meetings as an observer on behalf of the Mosgiel Tari Community Board. I am not a member of the trust or a trustee per se. In respect to the annual plan and pre-draft long-term plans that you're going to consider at this meeting, I firstly want to wish to acknowledge the work of the staff in producing these budget papers and compliment them on the compiling and inclusion of this supporting city profile and the strategy documents which add clarity to understanding the council's longer term vision for the city. I've found that this time round to be very refreshing, and I certainly found it quite useful. In terms of the Mosgiel-Tari ward, I just wish to bring to the council's attention its importance in respect to the overall city. Mosgiel-Tari ward has 14.7% of the Dunedin city's residential dwellings and 13.7% of its population. Its growth, as calculated from the census periods 01 and 06 and 06 to 013 respectively, experienced 7.6 and a 10% increase in growth for dwellings, and a 6.7 and a 6% in population, while the remainder of the city had a 1.9 and a 2% for dwellings and a 3.4 and a 0.6 in population. And looking at the demographics for both the two groups, that is the Mosgiel-Tari ward and the Dunedin city, they both showed negative growth for the 0 to 14 and 15 to 39 age groups. However, notable growth in the 40 to 65 and 65 plus categories were quite extensive for the Mosgiel-Tari ward, 11% and 21.9%, while the remainder of the city was 4.7 and 10.6. So these results are a strong indication of the importance of the Mosgiel-Tari ward has in the overall growth of our city. The need to ensure adequate investment is available for new as well as the enhancement and maintenance of existing infrastructure and amenity in order to support and sustain this growth has never been more pressing. The pace of development is quickening, and our infrastructure needs and transportation in Three Waters must align with the changing demographic profile and be delivered in parallel with this evolving development. In terms of the areas of concern, specific concern to the board are the new aquatic facility in Mosgiel, and I'd like also just to ensure that the council does not look or miss the larger picture as the reason why a new aquatic facility is required, and that is to address the capacity constraints of our facilities throughout the city. It is also interesting to note that the aquatic facility is, or should be, a revenue generating domain, and if we have accepted that we have a capacity that we are not servicing, then here is an opportunity to increase that revenue. State Highway 87, Gordon Road, heavy traffic impediments to traffic movements and pedestrian safety. This is an area that we have spoken as a board about now for quite some time, and the issue is not going away. East Tari subdivisions in State Highway 1 area in particular, Elizabeth Avenue, only has access to it off State Highway 1. It is an area where there are quite a number of young families and whose children attend the East Tari school, where the only egress to that school is along State Highway 1, which has inadequate pedestrian facilities and of course caters for a very high traffic level. So we have safety concerns over the connectivity and access of local roads for local traffic and pedestrians in that area as a whole. Reticulated Outram sewage, the time is here now where we need to be thinking about a system to allow greater development intensification and to mitigate existing septic tank overflow and the resulting contamination. Improve street and amenity maintenance and service levels. There are any number of streets on the Tari that either suffer from vegetation overgrowth, culverts and drainways require clearing, not to mention street sweeping and the such like. These need to be looked at. And finally, the Saddle Hill. The board would strongly recommend that we're hoping for a solution for a swift conclusion to the quarrying issue. It has been going on for a great number of years. We want to see some finality to the issue, however it may fall. So in your deliberations, the board urges favourable consideration be given by yourselves to these concerns and address in the budgets under discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Questions, councillors? Councillor McTavish.
Thank you, Bill. Just wondering about, we've got a couple of different reports considering different transportation projects, and you've mentioned a number here. One of the ones that connects with your board, which isn't mentioned, is the potential cycleway through to Mosgiel through the two tunnels, and I'm just wondering if you have any comment on the relative merits of that project for your area, and whether or not that has been something that has been considered by the board and it's deliberately excluded from your list, and whether it has simply been an oversight or what?
No, the board is supportive of cycleways through the connectivity between Mosgiel and Dunedin through the tunnels. It is in our community plan. I have not mentioned it this morning.
Thank you.
Councillor Wiley.
Bill, on the 10th of January, Jeff Plunker from Port Otago talked about developing an inland port at Mosgiel, and then looking at your discussion about heavy truck movements. Are you aware of what's happening with?
I'm aware of the subject, and that there has been media comment and street talk, but that, I'm sorry, is as far as it goes.
Thank you.
Councillor Newton.
Thank you, Worship. Bill, has the board, with regards to Outram Sewerage, has the board cited any documentation or concerns from the Otago Regional Council in a formal sense at any point in time with regards to contamination, and I assume you're referring to flood events?
Yes, not in recent time, probably two terms ago it was talked about, and the ORC did provide some information, but it went no further than that.
Thank you.
Councillor Vandals.
When you say, Bill, that the board are supportive, are you talking about a unanimous support of the board, or are you talking about a majority support of the board?
In respect to what?
In respect to the issues over traffic in Main Street in Mosgiel being moved, heavy traffic being moved, in relation to the pool, in relation to a number of things actually.
The consensus of the board is supportive of the points that I've spoken about this morning.
Right, but you're not claiming a unanimous consent?
No.
Thank you.
Any further questions, councillors? Thank you, Bill.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. This is Gary, Otago Peninsula Community Board. Welcome, Christine.
Well, greetings to the Mayor and councillors for this long-term plan, and I don't have any cherries, but I do look forward to another fruitful year, excuse the pun. 2014 was a year of significant progress for our board and the area, and in particular the highlights were the progress on a lot of long-standing projects, and I'll talk more about that in a moment. We're looking to 2015 as being a year when we consolidate and finish off a number of projects, and we've got some new initiatives on the horizon. They're not large ticket items, I will say, but we've had a large overhaul of our community plan and very clear direction from that. We spent a lot of time as a board going through that process, and it's certainly given us real direction. First of all, I want to thank the council and the staff. The progress on those significant projects meant a great deal of work in the background by staff who worked extremely hard, and we thank council and staff for that. Some of them were very challenging, and I want to just note that the board values that partnership approach. It's very much a partnership, and we've worked hard at developing really good relationships with staff. The clear priorities for our board area, there are two major projects. These won't come as a surprise to you: the accelerated Portobello Harrington Point Road Safety Improvement Project and the Tauroni project. And they're both long awaited, as you know, and we anticipate completion soon, or commitment, or final sort of confirmation of those. I just want to touch on the accelerated road widening project. I've been to this council many times about it, so you know the board's view very clearly. I guess the thing to say is it's a cause for great celebration that we're where we are now, and at this time, and looking at the long-term plan and the financial constraints that you as a council are looking at and having to work within, it has to be a really good news story that here's a significant project that will deliver significant safety benefits and will unlock significant economic opportunities for not only the peninsula but for the city, we believe, and is set to save nearly $3 million. That has to be a good news story. It's a real credit to both council for its support and staff again on this, and we urge you, when you come to look at the report this morning on that, and you've got some choices to make, that option 1 or 2, we actually don't mind which. Option 1 or 2 is fine. I mean, the other option that you have is to go back to looking at a 10-year plan and what order to do it in and all of the implications of that, and I don't think any of us want to go there again. So it's great to be where we are. I guess even a year ago we couldn't have envisaged that, and I think it's a sign that the community has great anticipation because we're starting to talk about detail. I was at a council meeting, you recall, where we discussed colour of rock and such things, and I've got community members approaching me about the light pollution, possible light pollution, and how we might address that as we come to the detail of the cycle. I think these are all really good signs that we're looking at detail and we're at that point where people can see that it's actually going to happen. And I want to tell you that the Turnbulls Bay SIP repair, which I haven't included in my paperwork, began on Monday. And local people came by while I was talking to the project manager. Huge amount of excitement. We've waited 2 years, it's been a really long time. But here was a great opportunity that came out of a crisis of the slip, and we're going to get something at the end of it, an outcome that's so much more than we could have ever hoped for. So that was due again to the hard work of staff and council. Other projects. Dominated by road safety, as I said, we've revised our community plan, and I'll go into more detail when we come to the submissions later in the process, but we're always very aware of road safety on the peninsula, and it's not just about the Portobello Road. We've had 7 accidents from before Christmas to now. Miraculously, no fatalities. Miraculously, no serious injury. In fact, it astonishes me people have walked away with not a scratch on them. And that's a number of factors, but of course the forgiveness of the road is a really important part of that. And so we've addressed that in our revised community plan in terms of some specific issues, and we'll work with staff. They're not big expenses, but of course there is expense tied up with them. One of the other projects, which won't come as a surprise, is the effective management of freedom camping on the peninsula, and it's an issue that's addressed by many areas around the country. And we're hoping that Council will decide to review the bylaw. We feel that it does need to be reviewed. But we just want to flag here that we believe that significant resources are going to have to be put in place to enforce any new bylaw. On the other side of that, we believe this can be self-supporting, as it is in Queenstown. But there was talk before about staff and cost of outsourcing. I think this is one area where you may need to look at an in-house staff member specifically to enforce whatever you decide as a new bylaw, rather than having outside contractors. But that will obviously be something that staff will look at, recommend, and Council will consider at some future stage. We're just very excited about the winning of Gigatown. But I want to just refer to what Steve Walker said, because we're looking to lobby various organisations, and we would really like Council support. But across the community boards, it's a real concern for us that in our rural areas and semi-rural areas, some of our residents have the equivalent of dial-up speed. And within those areas, there are some significant tourist destinations and operations of other organisations, Port Otago being one of them, and we really want to work towards improving broadband speeds. So that's something we'll be working on with our colleagues. Given the number of artists, filmmakers, musicians, songwriters, writers, poets living on the peninsula, of course the delivery of the arts and culture strategy, and the City of Literature, which was a fantastic win for the city, a real significance to our area. And on our list of new projects for our area, we have public artwork on the peninsula as one of those, so I just draw your attention to that. These are all very exciting platforms for new initiatives on the peninsula, and we're really confident that it will assist to ensure that our area continues to contribute significantly to Dunedin's economy in the future. And I'm really keen to take any questions if you have them.
Questions, councillors? Councillor McTavish.
Chris, just in relation to the campsite which is being discussed for the peninsula, is the board broadly, in principle, supportive of that as a possibility?
Yes, and it's been quite interesting listening to the community. Perhaps there have been a shift in attitudes, actually, I've noted over the last year. The staff have worked very, very hard to enforce the freedom camping bylaw, and as they've done that, I mean, we've all learned many lessons, and staff have worked extremely hard, as I say. So I've noticed a shift in attitudes about that. I've certainly been talking about the dock campsite for about 9 years at Council. And what I see as a shift is that this is a feasible option. But of course, DOC has a process to go through, and we need to allow them to do that. There's a feasibility study which we're really interested in the results of that. We're also awaiting the results of the research being done by the university amongst the freedom campers to deliver around spending habits and so forth. That is going to be very interesting. So in principle, yes, we had a presentation from DOC about this, and we noted it, and we're now waiting on those results. I mean, they have their own process. They have campsites throughout New Zealand. They will find a piece of land that is their land, or that they have responsibility for, and we'll go through that process. There'll be significant community consultation. But the indication I have is that there is support in the community, and that has shifted, that attitude has shifted, and certainly general support on the board. But we're awaiting the detail, really. we're very conscious, just to add that, we have a great responsibility for the area in terms of wildlife and the biodiversity of the area. And it's always a balance between the needs of residents, the biodiversity values, and the reason that people come to visit our area. And that's an ongoing balance that we're needing to consider all the time.
Further questions? Thank you, Christine. Much appreciated. Now, Saddle Hill Community Board, I understand Ms. Jemmett is standing for the chair. Welcome, Pam.
Mayor, councillors, thank you very much for the opportunity to advocate on behalf of our community at this forum. The Saddle Hill Community Board has a list of priorities and projects for consideration for the council's annual process, and have reviewed our planning arrangements and identified a few areas that we'd like to see completed and considered during the term. First of all on our list of priorities is the Saddle Hill issue, and we appreciate the efforts that have currently been undertaken, but this is an important landmark in our community, not just in the Saddle Hill community, but the wider Dunedin area. And it's part of our history, so we're very supportive of stopping the quarrying on Saddle Hill, and will continue to advocate for that to be our key priority there. The Brighton domain is a source of concern and has been for some time. We acknowledge the work that the Parks Department has carried out, but understand the lack of funding, but it still remains a priority, and it's used by the wider community, and it will be so no more so on Saturday when we host the Brighton Gala Day. So I encourage you all to come out to Brighton on Saturday and actually have a look at some of the issues that we're facing. We'd like to see a management plan put in place, but our shorter term goals would be to develop concept plans and implement the landscaping and improvement. There's some safety concerns around some fencing around clay, and we also want to see the toilets repainted and development of formal car parking areas. We have had some vandalism issues, and the installation of a camera has reduced those, so we appreciate the work of the council staff in organising this. But there are urgent drainage repairs, and those they affect the ability of people to to go out there actively in the winter and play their sport. It is a very big concern for us. Footpath construction and curbing, as always, is on our priority list, and we'd like to see a footpath on at least one side of all of our roads in our area, and we have highlighted some of those in our submission. The Morris Road slippage is in our submission, but I understand that work has been happening on that in the recent past, so there's a contractor being engaged. The problem has been identified and they're watching it, but we still want to make sure that something does happen there. And seal extensions, we've got a number of roads in our area that don't have a seal on those. We know that the council has been under some pressure in terms of committing money to seal extensions, but we've identified some roads that we'd like to see some work done on if if the council can see their way to putting some funding back into that. The Fair Play Street Reserve, it's been a popular addition to the community with the new playground, and we're very thankful for the work that was done on that, but we still lack toilet facilities there. We'd like to see those as one of our priorities for this term, and also the tennis court, which is under some disrepair at the moment, upgraded to more suitable use. And we have met with the community about some of the issues that they'd like to, or activities that they'd like to see the playground put to, but we haven't been able to progress that, and we'd like some support from council to do that. And as some of the other boards have already indicated, cycleways, well, that's all, that's part of our strategy as well. The southern scenic route and Morris Road are well used for cycles at the moment. I know there was some talk about the tunnel, but at the moment we have quite a number of people using particularly Morris Road. It doesn't have any facility for cycling and it's quite narrow, so there's some issues there that we'd like to see addressed in the foreseeable future. The Ocean View Playground, well, we believe that Colin Weatherall has done a huge amount for our community, and in reflection of that, we'd like to see that the playground be renamed to recognise the contribution of his work, so we'll be looking toward doing something about that. What isn't in the submission is the discussion that's already been had by two other boards this morning about the Gigatown, and we also in the Saddle Hill Community Board area have a number of people who actually don't even have access to broadband and are dealing with dial-up, so we would support any action that the council could put into promoting the extension of that fibre optic network widely, so we'd fully support the discussion around that. We appreciate the work that's been done on projects such as Walton Park upgrade and look forward to seeing the completion of that, and would like to see some of our priorities completed this year and look forward to council support in looking favourably at our priorities for the foreseeable future. So appreciate the opportunity and welcome any questions.
Thank you, Pam. Questions, Councillor? Councillor Banks.
Regarding preservation of Saddle Hill, how much do you think the council should consider spending or continuing to spend to try and save what is left of Saddle Hill?
I haven't, or the board hasn't given consideration to the dollar value of that, but what value do you put on a landmark, on a historical monument, as it were, that has to be considered in the debate?
That's exactly my question for you, and hopefully if you could take that back to the board. The cost of the quarry itself directly has been suggested at 15 million. The cost of not having availability to the cheap roading material that comes out of that quarry over time could be very much more than that. I would love to have some feedback from the board regarding what they think would be a reasonable cost, or an acceptable cost to the board at least, for the ratepayers to pay to try and save that monument. It's a very tricky question, but if we could have some steer on it, it would be helpful for me at least.
Happy to take that back to the board.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Right. Thank you, Pam.
Thank you.
Mr. Williams, Strathtyra Community Board. Welcome, Barry.
Thank you very much, and a very new or happy new year to all the staff and councillors, and a challenging one, I would guess. We're pretty small in our requests. We're aware that because of the areas that we've got, that if you keep spending money, the rates will go up, and then we have a further problem with our rural guys. It has been noted on the board up there that no reduction in services. We hope that that continues that way, but aware of with the inflation things that those things will still cost more, so we're just aware of that. The one thing at home is Bill was talking about the swimming pool and the Tyree, but we've got one in Middlemarch that we haven't had an increase in funding for maybe 8 or 10 years, and the costs keep going up, and the usage seems to be rising, and particularly this year when it's that bloody hot that they're almost melting, so just if that can be considered. They've tried a new dust suppressant supposedly this year in our area that they might as well have put rain on it. Well, the rain would have done more good because it would have helped the paddocks, but I wish they would try some of their testing in other areas. I noticed that Maniatoda still use oil. I've had quite a few people that are in the areas affected have said, oh, when are they going to do it? And it has been done. It's absolutely useless. So I just think some of those things, it's costing money, it's quite expensive seemingly, and honestly it's hopeless. One thing and the other thing probably that I hope hasn't slipped, but we've had on the sort of agendas for quite a few years, irrigation in the Strathtorry. If any of you were free for 50 minutes or an hour, it'd be quite a challenging drive, or not a challenging drive, a good drive to come and have a look and see how desperate it is just out of the town. It's quite serious, and then it's widespread. So probably we're looking to support as many people as we can as community. I mean, I talk to a guy every 2 or 3 weeks, so he didn't top himself. The other thing that I'm concerned with, that I did send something down a few months ago, Southland, every week or fortnight they put in a program of what's being done in the areas by the council. Now we're just about like spare Richards at a christening. The council come up, or staff come up to do something, and people ask us, what are they doing? And really we've got no idea. So a bit of planning or a bit of notification would be useful. They are working on our suspension bridge at the moment, which we appreciate. Had a few hiccups and obstacles, but I understand it's going to be reinstated to the way it's been. So yeah, thank you for the staff for that. We would like to thank, as a community board, the staff in general and our GSOs, or the girls that do all the donkey work for us and try and keep us on track. So yeah, special thanks to that. Can't be easy. And yeah, that's probably about all, Dave. So yeah, any questions?
Thank you.
Fire them out.
Questions, councillors? Councillor Noon.
Barry, can you just clarify under item 1 what you're actually asking council to consider in terms of a monetary amount? $10,000, I think, is the annual grant to the Middlemarch pool.
Yes.
You're asking for a minor increase. What does it actually equate to? What do you?
Well, it hasn't been increased for a few years. I don't know if it went up to 15, it would be pretty good. What's that? Be excellent. There's an extreme amount of, or huge amount of local work goes into it to keep it functioning and operating. A lot of all voluntary, but it does cost to run.
Are you able just to put a dollar figure on the voluntary component? The in-kind work and whatever donations are made, roughly?
I don't know, could be 20 grand, perhaps, or more. A rough guess.
Councillor Peake.
Thanks, Barry. Just on the irrigation question, I'm just wondering what your board has been doing in relation to the ORC and whether the regional council is active in this area of helping.
Yeah, there's a committee at home, or a group that have been chasing it around for quite some time. Kate's been involved in that for a good number of years, but it's drastic at the moment. They turned everyone off for 24 hours irrigating, and the level went down, so I really don't know what happened there. It's probably the lowest I've seen it, particularly this time of year in a lifetime. So I think it's just really want to raise the dam at the back, which would give us more water in the river, but my fear right through, and I think Kate will back me up, is I'd be awful concerned that the ones up the Maniatoda will just keep flogging it anyway. But a lot of permits are due for renewal in about 2020, so that will be interesting.
Councillor McTavish.
It's not strictly budget related, but I just wonder whether the chair, or Barry, you've got any comment on if there's anything that the urban community can do in the short term to support the communities up there that are struggling.
Ginty, I'm not too sure of that. It's just that we're trying to be aware of it, and Andrew's probably got a similar problem. They're not too bad. Well, I've dried off a bit in the last short time, but I think with the downturn in the dairy industry and then the sheep and beef, as well as the droughts caused the sheep and beef one, but the lack of or drop in income, you know, I can see a lot of sheep and beef farmers' income well down on previous, mainly through the drought and manipulative freezing companies. So I don't know whether there's Rural Woman, there was something on the radio recently about them concerned about it. So you're just trying to monitor it and keep people heads up.
Councillor Woods.
Barry, you'll be aware, just because you mentioned irrigation, that the Dunedin City water supply comes from the Taira catchment tributaries, and one of the issues is that we don't have a system that can be turned down for the water take because of the design. That work isn't scheduled till 2027 or 37, sorry. And I'm just wondering, is it your impression if the water takes are limited by the water in the Tairi, we should be looking at considering whether that should be brought forward in line with reviews, or at earliest date possible, in order that we can reduce the take from the Tairi catchment to enable better environmental and economic outcomes of the water.
Yeah, I'm not too sure. It probably should be pulled into line a bit sooner with the other one, but I don't know how it's going to go, Kate. We're probably in the same area as a lot of other areas that rely on rivers for that type of thing.
Thank you.
Councillor Busy.
Just a question, Barry. Given a couple of comments you made, is there some way council can help in a social sense? You mentioned Rural Woman, but is there some social organisation that may be able to assist with some of the problems you have with some of the farming community?
I think there may be, but we'll probably get a group together, and the time you get a group together, often it rains and then sort of that problem disappears again for a while. But probably if we advertise that, it might happen. Probably there could be ways that we may be able to utilise that. Yeah.
Thank you, Barry.
Thank you, Dave.
Appreciate it very much. Now, I know, councillors, that Jared Collins from the Wakaiti Coast Council is speaking to us tomorrow, so that is the conclusion of the community board presentations for today, and I think we'll break now for morning sessions, so we'll be back here at 10 to 11. Right, councillors, we'll resume. 1, 2, 3, So we're on to item 5, councillors, and as you see on the order paper, I'm to move from the chair the overarching resolution that the council, consisting of the mayor, deputy mayor and all available councillors here, consider and make determination on all submissions received on the draft long-term plans. Seeing the councillor Staines, is there any discussion on that? I'll put it. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Right, on to item 6. Come over to the new decision sheet. So we have now I note that there is a requirement for another resolution here, another overarching one actually, on the decision sheet, and that is, and I'll move it, that any resolution made in this section of the meeting may be subject to further discussion and decision by the meeting. So we go through, we decide on things tentatively, and then when at the end we have a wash up and we look at the implications of one on each of them, and at that point they're subject to change if we wish. So rather than trying to keep everything in our head all at once and worry about what implications there may be, we can relax until the end and then we worry. So I'll move that from the chair, second to Councillor Staines. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Now, then, Jane, is there any, you're on the city profile now, I take it, so I'll invite you up here. So this, councillors, is pages 2.1 to 2.20, the draft city profile, and under the, my understanding is that under the new legislation, we are required to note all of the supporting documentation for the long-term plan consultation as well. So we need to go through each one at a time and just so you can see the recommendation there.
No, not everybody's got that, but they've got the decision sheet.
Right. So we're on the draft city profile. So I'll just throw out any questions for anyone who wishes to clarify anything at this point. Councillor Benson.
Just a question in terms of the text. I've got a number, surprise, surprise, of grammatical errors in the draft.
I have observed. I thought Councillor Peter.
I don't be unnecessarily tedious and go through the however many there are now, but if I can communicate directly with the staff about that.
Yes, that's fine. It is draft and no proofreading has happened.
I noticed it.
I'm the staff will be most grateful for your grammarian input.
Just beyond that though, there's an issue because this is an important document in terms of how we market ourselves. And it seems to me there are some other opportunities which I'll convey in the same way, where while we know what we want to be, we also are often inferring that we aren't well down the track towards what that might be, and there's a mixed message that's coming across in the text, and if people are happy, I think we should all feed that sort of stuff through to staff as well. Ultimately, comms and someone will do that editorial message.
Councillor Peck.
Yeah, just following up on that, I'd just like to say something about what I see as a deficiency in it, and that is almost complete absence of a recognition of the natural heritage of Dunedin, and it's very anthropocentric, and I've no argument with the way what's there now. I just think there is something missing, and what is missing, and you get it reinforced later anyway, but is that the city is wildlife, the biodiversity, the habitats are a tremendous asset, and you should acknowledge that here.
Happy to add that content.
Can I suggest that for the purpose of including some of that work in the ultimate resolution, we get round questions now, and then I'll put the recommended resolution that the draft city profile be amended or approved or whatever, and we can include all that in at that point, and we can have discussion at that point. So any further questions? Right. Councillor Max.
It may come into it again, something just for staff to consider, but on page 216, in relation to the green box, which highlights three key issues, I guess. The last one in relation to public transport. I just query whether or not it's actually public transport accessibility which is commonly raised. More frequently I read submissions around affordability or quality or frequency than actual accessibility, and I just wonder whether or not that is perhaps worth staff checking again, whether or not that is the most appropriate word to have there. And if it's not, then that affects the rest of the sentence, because that, we'll look at that again.
Thanks. I just have a question about on page 2 for population and demography. The box that says Dunedin's usually resident population grew 1.3%. Is that a technical term that we need to use, or could we just say Dunedin's population grew 1.3% over that period? Given the transient nature of our population, that could be misinterpreted, as I did initially, as being a resident versus student measure, even though that's been clarified, and I know that that isn't the case. Would it change the meaning significantly if that was simplified?
We can look at that. It is a standard term within the census stats. They're usually resident population.
But it'd be good if we gave an
but
explanation.
we can put some context around that.
That'd be helpful, thank you.
Right, I will move to the chair that the draft city profile as shown and including the amendments that have been suggested be approved as supporting documentation subject to any minor editorial corrections that may emerge. Secondly, Councillor Staines, any discussion? Councillor Banks.
I'm just wondering, especially regarding regional and national infrastructure and the underpinning transportation strategy that we have, if the recent massive reduction in fuel prices isn't something that we should at least acknowledge in the regional and national infrastructure requirement. If we have a reduction in fuel prices, then private motor vehicle use becomes even more attractive because public transport costs involve paid drivers and private ones don't. So I'm wondering, is there any way that we can at least acknowledge that there is a shift in terms of the economics of our transportation infrastructure as a result of the much reduced fuel prices?
Yeah, this has been raised in relation to the significant forecasting assumptions as well, so we need to have a think about that, how to express that.
Is it something that can make its way into the draft?
If you have a look in the draft, the final section on the very last page, there's a section on oil price volatility. Now that section just talks about challenges around volatility. It doesn't talk about increase or decrease, because clearly prices are volatile in the last, if you look at the trend over the last 3 to 5 years. But we have been asked to have a look at the impact of recent decreases and what they might mean for our budgets, and we're looking at those at the moment.
Right. The point I was hoping to make was that during the time of the transportation strategy, it was an assumption that fuel prices would increase and become unaffordable. And that's why we had to do much more in the way of public transportation and cycleways. Now that strategy is essentially, that assumption has essentially changed and looks as though it will change or have changed for at least the next five years due to the new technology that they are now able to produce oil at much cheaper prices. Shouldn't we not just talk about volatility? Shouldn't we recognise that within the scope of the next 10 years, fuel prices are going to be much cheaper than anticipated, and that will have a significant impact on the economics of transportation?
I think that Jane's right, that we need to do some looking into it to determine what assurance we have that it is even semi-permanent or not. I don't know the answer, but I think that the premises in the transportation strategy were around it being a finite resource, and that being the case, it will increase in price, but we don't know when. So I think that a bit more research to address your point would be worthwhile.
Thank you.
Councillor Calvert.
I was really keen on the vibrant, fun city, and I'd just like a wee bit more in the profile connection between what, as far as we can tell, makes people think.
Yeah, and thank you for your comments that you sent through earlier about that section. It does need a little more work and some more content to beef it up a bit.
Councillor Wilson.
I just wanted a point of clarity first, is that the transport strategy, we did listen to Councillor Vandervis in the preparation of that report, and it didn't make the assumption of increased oil prices. It actually talked that it will be possibly up or down, and noted it wasn't an assumption. So we dealt with that at that strategy, and I think you'll find that that's not an assumption in there now. Just a question here. This profile looks a tad negative because we're always comparing it with the national standards. And I'm not sure that, and I appreciate why we need to do that, but I also think that we should be comparing it to our own expectations and how we've performed. And that may give quite a different report. But also, if there was one other section in there called affordability rather than standard of living, again, I think it would give quite a different perception of the city. And as we want to be a great small city, I'm not quite sure why we would only measure ourselves by factors that I think fail to appreciate the really good things about Dunedin and measure them in a positive sense. And so I think affordability, I think Dunedin is, and perhaps that's reflected in the low incomes, it is a really affordable city, and I think it's one that we should be quite proud of. And the work that's going on to ensure that that continues is also really good. So I understand why we've got these really old-fashioned, rather generally generic terms where we're not actually measuring ourselves against, I think, what we want to be. And I think that skews it to sound relatively negative. And the challenge would be, which I don't have the answer, is to give it to show that we're actually okay.
Yeah, and to find the data sets that support that.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Is it a minor change to include that, or does it come into your minor changes?
I think we can have a look at that, yes.
Yeah, I think it comes into amended, and Jane's taking notes.
Yeah.
There will be a limit to how much we can do before we go out for consultation, but certainly for the final document that will go into the LTP, we can refine and improve.
Right, no, Councillor Luke.
Sorry, Your Worship, but just looking at the photograph on page 2.17, and I'm just wondering, in light of what's in front of the Environment Court, that perhaps we should have some less visible hills in the background of Mosgiel.
We'd like to have some hills, please, in Valley.
Someone take the photo the other way, looking towards the way to us.
We could find a picture from another angle.
Thank you. Cheers.
You could just Photoshop the hill back in. I mean, if you're that keen to spin things, why not?
Right, that's it. I'll put the recommendation that the draft city profile as shown amended be approved as supporting documentation subject to minor editorial corrections that may emerge. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Right, we're on to section 3, draft strategic framework. Page 3. I think just follow the same format, questions, and then there's a draft recommendation to be quite. So, on your distribution.
That's right. Can I just a word of explanation of the papers that you've had handed out? So what's in the papers you've already had is the draft text for inclusion in the LTP, which is a reminder of the strategic framework. What you've got in front of you is a piece of work that's just been pulled together, which is looking at how we link the strategic framework and the budget proposals that you've got in front of you. So if there are no questions on the material in that went out in the papers that were previously circulated, I would suggest just taking you through this sheet, if that's most useful.
I think we can combine them. So why don't you talk us through this,
okay,
and then we can take questions on any part.
All right. So the sheet in front of you shows the degree of alignment with the key strategies. It lists all the proposals down the left, obviously, and then uses shaded to indicate how closely each of the proposals aligns with the priorities in the various strategies. And then there are some notes down the side of the page which are basically a summary of this material altogether. I suppose just a sort of a health warning, I suppose, before we launch into the detail of it and people start asking questions about why particular squares are shaded the way they are. Just to say that the assessments are subjective and they're pulled together at quite short notice. They're pulled together by the people who wrote the reports, so they're the ones who know the proposals most closely, but then reviewed by the strategy owners. So each of the people, managers responsible for the various strategies has looked at this to assess that it's a relatively fair assessment. The other thing to note too is that the process isn't ideal because the various proposals before you are quite different in nature. So some of the proposals are sort of groups of various unfunded projects, for example, grants. They tick just about every box. So I just really wanted to say that this is just an indication. It's meant to be just one of the tools that you use in your decision making, rather than a decision making framework that if you've got ticks in every box, then your projects necessarily to be funded. And the only other thing just to highlight is that we're currently reviewing the report writing framework. So the intention is that in future, when you get any report for decision making, it will have a mini assessment of how it relates to the various our strategic priorities.
Any questions, councillors, on both that and the previous text?
Yeah, a question about the first 3.1, about the narrative in the third paragraph. Just similar to the comment I made earlier, and that line, which starts to help direct the city's limited resources, I just don't see why we know resources are always. I don't see any point in including the word limited in a document like this. I just ask for it to be recast so that it talks about the most rational use of resources or some such, rather than putting a negative cast on a text like this.
It can be accommodated.
Further questions, councillors? Councillor McTavish.
My question is on page 3.8 of the paper that we had circulated earlier, and it's just in relation to indicators. I note that this is the only box that doesn't have currently any measurements associated with it, or indicators by which we are judging our success or failure in this area. And I wondered when it's likely that we might have those. Is that a piece of work that we might hope to have in place before the final, or?
Before the final, we'll try to spend on the last 3 years.
Is that something that the sustainability audit subcommittee might be able to assist with? Thank you.
Councillor Benders.
Picking up on Councillor Benson Pope's issue with the limited resources, I would have thought that very limited resources in terms of available capital is something that we need to address as a reality, and that the inclusion of limited resources probably refers to our recognition that we have a very substantial debt, and that it's our policy not to go and spend a whole lot of money on new capital expenditure. So I see a very good reason for leaving the word limited in there. I don't see it as a negative. I see it as a recognition of a reality with which we need to address. My overall concern with this section being called a draft strategic framework is that a strategy is not just an aim or a desired outcome. A strategy is an aim and an idea of how you're going to achieve that aim. Now, in these pages that we have in front of us, 3.1 to 3.8, there's a great deal of desired outcome and a great deal of aim, and very little about how we're going to achieve these aims. It's a wee bit like the development strategy that we have, where we hope to have 10,000 more jobs and people are going to earn $10,000 more, and there's going to be 10 of everything. But how we actually get there is what I would like to see some of it here. I have absolutely no trouble at all with this being called a draft desired outcomes framework narrative for the LTP, or an aims narrative for the LTP. But in terms of a strategy, I don't believe it is one. I don't believe it is a roadmap for us to get from where we are to where we would like to be. I like a lot of the things in here in terms of aims, and I think we should be aspirational, but I don't think we should call things strategies unless there is a clear how to get there. And I'm wondering, is it possible for the draft to actually have a bit of how we get there, so that the public cannot look just at the aims and say, oh yes, we like that idea, but they can say, yes, we approve of how we're going to get to that point. Sorry to be a bit long-winded.
That's okay. I'd suggest that the how we're going to get there is set out in two other places, that this is just the highest level. So the actual detailed strategies that are flagged here, within those there are action plans. For example, the spatial plan has a whole range of actions that underpin it, as does the economic development strategy. And before you in the LTP proposals, you've got the proposed actions for over the next 3 years. So I'd suggest that not in these 4 or 5 pages, but in the wider documentation, you've got the plan that says how we're going to get towards these ultimate outcomes.
Is it not possible though to have some of those how we get there actually in the strategy that's going out for consultation?
I guess I'm
as
suggesting
far as economic development is concerned, for instance, I believe there's very little in the way of an action plan at all.
That's completely mistaken. The implementation plans for the economic development strategy are in there. Exactly.
So this is the framework of the strategies. This is not the strategy. This is not a strategy. It's a framework. It says here they are. We used to have 58. Now we have 8, or we're on the way to having a simplified set, each of which has key priorities and action plans to a greater or lesser extent that deliver on them. It's not a whole lot of action plans because there's not a lot of free money for action. But,
exactly,
but
which
there
is the point
some,
about the limited resources.
Well, there is some. You set a long-term goal in the sort of city that you want to be, and in each case, they're things that staff bear in mind when we make our prioritisation, this kind of thing for you to consider, okay, what is going to deliver on these more or less than other things, and that's the purpose of them. When you've got 58 strategies, as Councillor Thompson, I think, was fond of saying, they were good enough to justify an aluminium smelter on the Anamoana Mole. Pretty much anything would have got through 1 or 2 or 3 or 10 of them. So this is a framework, this is not the strategies. If we were to, this year, the consultation on the annual plan doesn't include releasing for public, for the public, the full draft annual plan. It would be possible to include sets of the strategies out for release, but this year the strategy document is at most kind of 40 or 50 pages. That's now the new legislative requirement about what we put out for consulting for the LTP now. There's clearly no room in that to include 8 strategies, all of which are 10, 20, 30, 40 pages long, with the strategic direction, your principles and your key areas for action. So I think that's a debate to have as each of the strategies comes up and gets signed off by council, which has been a process that you've been through several times in the last few years.
Thank you. A couple of questions. Firstly, just about a clarification really around the arts and culture strategy, which is one of the 5 key strategies now in place per this document. But I mean, it hasn't been adopted. Is this written in anticipation that will be adopted by the time this goes out?
Apologies, that we'll make sure that wording is correct at the time of it going out. You're right, it does refer to 6 and 5 as contract.
Yeah, I mean, regardless of the wording, it's sort of in the middle. It hasn't been signed off, but it's far further developed than those that are remaining, so it may pay to...
We'll amend it appropriately, yeah.
Thanks. And secondly, just about, it mentions the work here on the environment strategy and the parks and recreation strategies, which are long overdue, but I note that in the corporate policy budget, there's no budget assigned to either of those pieces of work.
So the Parks and Recreation strategy is being progressed by the Parks and rec team, and the environment strategy is being managed by the corporate policy team as alongside other core work. So yeah, there is no specific budget request for that.
Well, there was for the 14-15 year, but there's nothing.
Right. Yeah. Okay. I don't have. I'll have to check for you about whether further budget's required. I mean, obviously, ideally there would be, but my guess off the top of my head is that the team, Maria's decided that we can manage with the existing budget.
We can get to chapter 17. That's fine. Thanks.
Councillor Wilson.
It sort of follows on from that question. I see, noting on the picture, there's a wee asterisk which isn't noted anywhere beside the Parks and Recs and Environment Strategy and the Arts and Culture, showing that they're not adopted yet. I understand that, and I think they should just be hatched colouring, so that they've been worked on still. But I want to understand what have you based your, in this new sheet we've just received, your determinations for the environment strategy and parks and recs if we don't actually have anything on those really?
They've been based on previous goals that have been approved under other strategies. For example, under environment, we've looked at biodiversity strategy and other plans that fit under those. So yes, they're not approved. I suppose they're an interim set, I suppose, based on other council-approved documents.
Would it be possible? I'm not sure that I have a full understanding of what those strategies were and when they were adopted, and I actually wouldn't mind having some idea of what they are, because I think there's some strategies that predate some policy things that predate 2007 that I may or may change some of my thoughts on that if I had access to them. They're not easy to find on our website. They may not be easy to find, full stop.
Sorry, could I just clarify, is the request wanting to know which are the existing documents that fall under the umbrella of the environment strategy that we've based this on?
And the Parks and Recs. Only a list, or if we could have some hyperlinks. I don't want you to print them. There's some hyperlinks so that I can actually see what the calibre of those documents are.
We can send something around by email, say, over the next day or so.
Only if it's not a huge problem.
Councillor Calvin.
I'd like to thank the staff in particular for producing this document, because it provides one of the connections to me between the strategy and the outcomes, and I think that's going to be vital for us. But what it has highlighted is that there isn't necessarily an easy connection there, and what I'd love to be able to see sometime in the next while before we finalise this for this year, something that has community outcomes, and then so is that spreadsheet that we've got through here has the next column saying how we think we're going to achieve this, has the next column saying how it fits into the strategy, and has a column saying what are we going to do if we're not achieving it, what difference does it make to anything, because it must have been very difficult to achieve this document without those connective pieces, and you must have been reinventing the connective pieces to do this. For example, the transfer of powers for public transport planning and operations, shifting the buses to us is assumed that we'll be better integrating the rest of the transport network. If you produce that community outcome, wanting a good integrated transport network or something in the middle of there, you might come up with, why don't we talk more closely to the people who own the buses, and that might achieve the outcome. You've assumed that it will work better if we own them, but there's no sort of connection that gets you there quite, to me. And I realise that that's part of the art form and things, but if we could have the connection so as that piece in the middle, which is I think what Councillor Angus is sort of saying too, that it's the continuum, and so we've got an end and a beginning, and no.
Yeah, I think this is aligned with the question that Councillor Wilson asked, and the connected tissue that you're looking for is a consultant's report which comes to exactly those conclusions, and I would suggest that that be made available so we can find it, because that's what connects it.
But in a generic sense, that information you should, as we get a more coherent strategic direction, that information generically should be easier for you to find in the staff reports than it has been in the past. So the report should provide you with that level of connective tissue rather than on this one page. It would be, I think, almost impossible to do it in a simple sentence in a column, but you should be able to get that out of the reports.
Well, I think it's sort of,
increasingly over time.
But if we ended up with these community outcome pages, and each page had like 2 pages, and it said, here's the outcomes, here's what we're doing about it, here's why it fits in with the strategy, and here's what happens if we don't achieve that. Do we just throw more money at it, so next year they ask for more money? And it makes no difference whether we're achieving 40% or 90% or anything we once thought of, or nothing turns on it except that we've fulfilled a government requirement to provide community outcomes, and we've ticked them off, which seems that we have achieved. But the rest of it doesn't work.
Councillor Thompson.
Can I there's just a word of caution for me in the sheet, that there is a real risk of creating statistical delusions in terms of evaluating things based on the amount of colour in the line. I could derive you in a project, for example, that we widen a section of the city footpath and reseal it and provide free chalk to enable visitors and locals to express themselves in a way that they feel. And I would give you a stupendous line of colour right across here, but I'm pretty sure we wouldn't vote to do it. So can we just keep that in mind as we're reviewing this as well?
Can I make a comment? I'd like to reinforce that as well. I wanted to make that message when I provided my introductory comments. So we'd be suggest that the most useful part for you is the explanation down the side, where staff have tried to crystallise down what are the key messages about linkages for each project, rather than assuming that if you've got to tick in every box or colour in every box that it's necessarily a project that should go forward.
Right, are there any further questions? Right, the recommendation for this section is the draft content of section 3, draft strategic framework, as shown amended, and there's been some pickup on some suggestions. We approve the supporting documentation subject to any minor editorial corrections that may emerge. I'll move that from the chair, second to Councillor Staines, so for discussion. There being none, I'll put it. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Right. Section 4, draft financial strategy. I'd like to invite Mr. Mackenzie and Carolyn as well, just in case Mr. Mackenzie doesn't know the answers. Would you like to just kick off with an overview?
Yes, thank you. This is a draft strategy. Obviously, this is for everyone's input. And what we've tried to do is we've tried to follow what the direction from Council has been heading in the last few years. So I hope we've got that. The strategy tries to cover the major impacts on Council. So we'll talk about the group. It's significantly wider than the previous strategy was. The strategy does have some flexibility around, particularly the levels of debt and rate increases. The change to the working capital ratio, which we talk about in the document, has allowed us to allow the available lines of credit or availability of funds, has meant that we can use our working capital more efficiently, which has resulted in savings for ratepayers, which has been good. Also, the debt target, we've increased that from 200 to 230, and basically that's based on the additional debt from the state income across. However, you'll notice in the financials and the budgets that we're below that 230 target by 2021. We're just over 210 million. So, rates increase. The strategy allows for increases above the self-imposed 3% target, but this is under exceptional circumstances. I guess the issue that we do have is that the budget does show that only 3 out of the 10 years we actually are below that target, and I think that's an issue that we need to adjust. You need to note that those are inflation adjusted, and the reality is that the real world will be different from the forecasts anyway. The cash flow generated from DCHL Group, we've been conservative when we are likely to see higher returns there. We've inflation adjusted that from 2017-18, and I think that's probably a point for discussion at some time today. Those are my key points at this stage.
Well, could I kick off the questions, Grant, by asking you to just tease out a little more the implications of the difference between the financial strategy and the LTP in terms of that, where that 30 million sits? Because you mentioned that we in the financial strategies, if I understand you correctly, the 30 million was added on so that our target for 2021-22 was 230, not 200. But in the LTP, we've treated it somewhat differently, and it's projected to be paid back at the same amount, the same rate, and serviced at the same rate as DBL would have, and that I'm interested. I know I think that's the fact, but I want to know the implications.
Yeah. So the implications for council is that, look, with any debt, the longer the period, the more you pay in interest. So, however, if you're paying it back quicker, the current ratepayers are having to burden that as opposed to future ratepayers. So if there is a slowdown in that repayment, it will mean that there will be rate savings now, but they will have to be paid in future years. If that makes sense.
I'll open it up to further questions. Councillor Thompson.
Mine's not a question, it's a statement. So.
Well, I'm aware that you've foreshadowed a motion, which may well replace the one that's the recommended one, so we'll wait until then.
Yes, but quite apart from that, I was going to make a comment, but if you're taking it as questions first, I'll wait.
Well, unless you want to tease out that as a question, because I think this goes to the crux of what we're talking about. So I'm anxious that there's widespread understanding of what the situation is here.
Well, I'm not sure I can ask it as a question, but I'll put on my best John hat. I'll preface it.
Bearing in mind.
One of the concerns I've got is that with this financial strategy is that it seems to me that as a council we have not addressed a fundamental issue which ought to drive any financial strategy, and as a result, to a certain extent, this is an accounting strategy. It's a measuring strategy. It's and the gap for me is around what is this council's view as to what a debt level should be, and so you have some people whose doomsday clock is always set at about 30 seconds to midnight who might argue that $1's worth of debt is too much, and you have others who would spend and bugger the consequences. But what we don't seem to have is an understanding as a council around what would be an appropriate target and why. And I wonder if you have a view around... I don't know how to put it into a question. It's a statement. It's a concern that we've got a financial strategy that we don't have a strategic view around that key fundamental question. Is that a fair comment?
So I guess the response to that question would be that Standard & Poor's have been concerned about our debt level. So I think we need to be aware of that concern, and we need to be sending the right message to the markets that we are trying to get that debt level down. I guess it's a balancing act between the amount of debt and the affordability of debt that we've got as well. So it's not just about the quantum, it's about how we can actually afford that debt. And unfortunately, I hate to say this, but there is no right answer. There is no magic number that we should be saying that we should have 8% or 10% or whatever it is. It really does depend on the individual circumstances for this council or for that individual entity. I'm not sure if I've...
But do you accept that it would be appropriate for council to... I'm not saying now, but certainly I would have thought before the next LTP review to have actually given some consideration to where it actually feels a debt level ought to be and why. Because at the moment we've just got a number without any understanding of why.
Yes, I think that's a valid piece of work to be done. I guess the issue that we do have is, initially when I looked at this, I prefer a percentage of total assets, because as your asset base grows, your debt should grow or could grow as well, because the investments that we make generally tend to be for a long period of time, so it's an intergenerational argument. I was sort of put off that, because what can happen to our balance sheet at times is that you can have revaluations that can work against you, and you might be doing everything right, and then overnight you might actually breach your own limit because there's been a market shift in property values that then has a material impact on you. So I'm trying to say that we have been trying to think about what they are. I haven't got a final position yet that I think I can put to you and say, this is what I think best practice is across the sector, and these are the reasons why.
Councillor Wilson.
It follows along that line, sort of. When I read this, it reminded me that we've lived 7 years really discussing the stadium, a large part, and that's focused our mind, and I understand why that is, but it doesn't talk, if I look at an asset sheet in a business, it will have assets in there. All we talk about are investments, which are limited of what the city has. And we don't talk about our assets in this financial context, which then balances not only the debt, but also the benefits that accrue to the city, because you have those, and that may be a financial benefit, but more likely, again, going to that affordability and that standard of living that we can provide in the city. And because this is such a limited financial statement and doesn't take that bigger context, it's not only really dry reading, but it doesn't actually, I think, sell the city as the place that I find it to be. And that, I know, is a personal statement, but I think a lot of people find the city exceedingly rich in assets that make the city a fantastic place. And that can be, whether it be fantastic roads that take you meandering through some amazing countryside, or it can be having an art gallery with some of the country's best artwork in it. And we don't put that in there in any way.
I guess in defence of the financial strategy is that it is a financial strategy. It's not a social wellbeing strategy or anything like that. But I do take the comment about we don't talk about the assets. I guess the reason that we've done it that way is the fact that this is just a continuation or development of the previous financial strategy, where it was very focused. Effectively the last one was rates 543 and debt below 200 million by 2021. We're trying to build on that. And you'll be aware that I try and give context to our debt on a regular basis, particularly when we talk about our monthly financials. because debt is one number in isolation, and it sounds a large number when you've got $3.8 billion worth of assets, though it puts it in a completely different context.
Yeah. Can I take that further with another question then? Is that we will be presented now and in the future with opportunities to work with the community, which, if we only focus on the debt side of it, may swing us or stop us looking at what benefits both the city and asset or the other benefits that may accrue, that if we don't have a framework to consider those, maybe lost opportunities. And Gigatown actually is quite an interesting one, which I haven't had a chance yet to read the report, having just picked it up. But I look at, we've been asked for some money there, it will be operational debt really, but what accrues from benefit, and we've got nothing to measure that by or to consider it by, or whether it will grow the assets of the city to make it a strategically important investment.
Yeah. So I guess the issue that we do have here is the fact that there is actually currently under the policy that the draft fiscal strategy, there is some headroom with our debt. If you go back, even this time last year, we're not in that situation. So yeah, it's a catch-22.
Councillor Vanders.
My question really has been kind of looked at, but my question is on the first sentence of the debt paragraph on 4.3, it says, any discussion of DCC Group debt needs to be balanced with an acknowledgement of the large asset base, Now, and Chief Financial Officer has said we've got $3.8 billion worth of assets. In a business, if this was the case, I could agree, because the 3.8 billion would actually be assets. But in our case, most of the 3.8 billion, as I said, are liabilities, including a lot of what's owned by, for instance, Aurora. And the reason it's a liability is because it just hasn't had maintenance for so long. So there's a massive deferred maintenance issue there. Given that we have a very large liability issue when we talk about assets that isn't often quantified, I wonder why it is that we even, it says here, it needs to be balanced with a large asset base. I'm wondering why it is that we just assume that this large asset base are actually assets at all, given that most of them require maintenance. And I'm not just talking about Aurora, I'm talking about the stadium, I'm talking about a lot of the large things that we have. And I wonder also whether or not Councillor Thompson's, I think, very important question of what is an appropriate target for debt for us, whether or not we should be looking at a more historical, the last century, for instance, figure in terms of trying to get some context to where we are now. And my view there would be, to answer Councillor Thompson's question, that in the last century, the amount of debt that we carried was negligible compared to the kind of debt that we now have. What we now have is quite unusual. So I wonder whether or not we really can justify that needs to be balanced with an acknowledgement of the large asset base. I wonder if that is really appropriate, given that we're not a business and given that most of these assets don't actually provide us with a return.
So I guess the context I'd say there is that the strategy is for council only, it's not for the group. While you're correct in saying, yes, we have a lot of assets that you could argue are not necessarily assets and you have to maintain them, but from the accounting rules, that's still deemed as assets. We do have two key assets, so within council, though, the Waipori Fund and the city investment portfolio,
yes.
Which are in excess of $180 million that we are getting return on, and you could argue that if push comes to shove, you could divest if necessary. I'm not advocating that at all. The other issue you raised was, sorry, I can't remember the last point.
Historic debt.
Oh, historic debt, yeah. And it actually comes back to Councillor Thompson's question as well. What you also need to consider when you're looking at a debt is the timeline and where you are in your renewals process. Because if you are, what you should be doing is you should be investing and then saving and then reinvesting. And depending on where you are, you might have more debt on and then repay it down and then save to do the renewal again. So it should be patching. I guess where we've got to is that the city's infrastructure is now, in a lot of instances, over 100 years old, and it does need to be renewed. Therefore, that's why we have got higher debt than we've had in the past century. Also, we've increased the level of service. You know, the water quality now is significantly higher than it was 20 years ago.
Thank you.
Councillor Calvin.
I've got 4 suggestions of changes to the financial strategy which I would like you to comment on whether you'd be happy to see in there. That's the question. The first is the removal of cash flow in its definition on 4.1, because I think it will confuse people. It says having cash flow at no less than the projected levels, including building up a cash reserve. I think we need a projected level that doesn't include internal reserves, because cash flow gives the feeling that we're flowing to us. And if it isn't flowing to us because it's building up reserves, then I think that's confusing, and I think we should change that wording.
So I guess you're talking about the Dunedin City Holdings Limited dot point 7?
Yes.
All right.
I'm saying it says on page 1 of 4.1, and I'm just saying cash flow will be a confusing thing there if you're saying it includes cash reserves. So I think that should only be talking about money that after cash reserves are being built up or whatever they need to do whatever they're doing. So that's thing number 1. Is that something that you'd be comfortable with?
So the reason that we're talking about having a cash reserve in DCHL is that the reality of the situation is, you know, commercial entities, their profit goes up and down depending on the market they're in. So City Forest is probably a good example. Commodity, when commodities are doing well, they produce a high dividend or high surplus, which then comes through. What we're trying to say here is that it's problematic for council when we have a large shock at short notice. So if the wood price drops significantly, they will not be able to continue to pay the current level of dividend. Therefore, someone is going to have to absorb that drop. What I am indicating here is that I believe that that should be in DCHL, and that they should have some buffer so that we've got certainty here for when we set our rates, because effectively we're setting rates now on forecast effectively 18 months in advance, which in the business cycle is quite a long way away when the market can change so much. So that's the reason we're saying we think there should be cash reserve in there. There has been one in the past, and as you're all aware, that cash reserve has been used up, and that's one of the reasons why we've had a drop in.
Yes, I'm not uncomfortable about the cash reserves. I'm saying using the word cash flow, it's to include cash reserves is not actually.
If you took out include to be require,
return, it'd be, yeah.
Right.
Sorry, the cash flow is from DCHL to DCC. The cash reserves are within DCHL.
Yeah, correct.
The cash flow shouldn't include stuff that stays in DCHL.
But it doesn't.
The word include should be required, and then it would make sense.
Or cash flow could be changed to return.
It's the include, which is a problem because it sounds like it's cash flow included.
Anyway, could that be reworded? It's obviously confusing even us.
It's a draft strategy, so anything can happen.
So if we're putting it out for consultation, could we reword it out? And using perhaps return, not profit.
Can I answer that? The reason that we use cash flow is because you've got to remember it's a combination of interest on advances and dividend flow. So it's not just quite as simple as, because normally you just put dividends, but the way that the entities have been set up, it's a combination of the two.
Yes. The second thing I'd like to see changed in the document we're putting out for consultation is the second last paragraph on page 4.2, and I'd like to see removed from that, with rates and at affordable level, borrowing reducing and greater certainty and things. I don't think we've got a basis particularly for that sentence, and I don't think it's our financial strategy isn't that rates are at an affordable level, for example. I think that whole part of the sentence can just disappear. Just sort of doesn't belong in a financial strategy in my view. Whereas saying that we've shifted our focus and saying that we'll continue to provide services and things, the beginning and end of that seems strategic, and the piece in the middle seems just a matter of opinion that may or may not be a matter of opinion.
So what you might, would something be acceptable to you there, Hilary, that spoke more to, instead of the rates being at an affordable level, with rates increases no longer at levels that have historically been seen, or something that speaks to the fact that we have reduced rates increases rather than the actual magnitude of the rates bill?
Yes, I don't think we need it all, but I don't mind if it's...
I should say that it certainly was in the thinking when the 543 was set. Affordability was very high in everyone's mind. That's one of the drivers of it. So affordability.
Yes.
So whether you're looking at affordability in terms of increases, where affordability did feature, or whether you're looking at affordability in quantum terms compared with the rest of the cities, for instance, of New Zealand, I don't think that's an unjustified statement.
With rates now, I mean, I'm happy for it to acknowledge that people have been working hard to constrain rates increases, but that's it. So I just think the wording could change in the middle of there. The comment that they're affordable or not is just it's not a... But that we've been working hard to do something about it is very definitely a...
So a possibility might be something like, with rates increases now constrained with affordability in mind. Something like that.
As I said, it's a draft strategy. If we need to change the words, we've had feedback from the auditors as well, who suggested some other changes, so there will be changes to this document. So,
the third thing is, could we, partly bearing in mind previous comments, could we have, as part of our financial strategy, that we maintain we do what we need to do to maintain our credit rating, or do what we can to, so that, because that speaks partly possibly to debt level or other things from your comment about that, if we had in there, that's part of our strategy, is to keep interest rates down by maintaining our rating.
So I don't disagree with the point. What worries me there is 2 points. Is one, to improve our credit rating, we actually need the government to improve theirs, because they are very unlikely to ever have our rating higher than the sovereign. The second point is that we have to be aware of the fact that the way they rate industries. So if they don't like a particular industry, they'll downgrade everyone within that industry, and so they might say, actually, we don't like the outlook for local government, so they'll then downgrade local government in its entirety. So we have to be careful. We might have not done anything, and we might be doing everything we should be doing, but we could get downgraded because something completely beyond our control.
So our strategy would be to do our best to, so as that if we're doing something that speaks to that, then it is speaking to our strategy.
Yes.
So it's not that we know we can achieve it, we just, as an aim, I think it's a good, to aim to do these other things, and a strategy to do them is to keep our credit rating as far as we're able to. Sort of, if we could have that in there, that seemed to me quite useful. And the last thing is that I think it would be useful to have, especially with discussions about debt levels and assets and the like, that we keep our people informed about what our assets actually are, the value of them and how we've determined them, and what our debt levels are from time to time, that we intend to annually or whatever it is put out, because we haven't got clear intentions even to achieve that. And by that I mean some real understanding of what DCHL is worth, for example. And I'm not talking about the assets that we can't buy or sell, that we're pipes under the ground or anything, but assets such as we're wanting income for or using as investments, that we do try and put out to our people once a year or once or whatever it is, however often we can, what our actual assets on which we're hoping for a financial return, and our debt, so as we can get a feel for that, and the people of Dunedin can.
So currently under the standards that accounting standards that we use, we fair value the Waipori Fund, we mark the property portfolio is revalued on an annual basis, so council effectively, and we revalue the infrastructure of council, including buildings. So effectively you'd say council's assets are at market value, whatever, or as Councillor Vandervis might say, council's liabilities are at market value. The group, within the group, the main entity, or the two main entities, or three main entities that don't get revalued are the airport, 50% share of that, Aurora and Delta. City Forest gets revalued basically because of the way you calculate the return from the forest. So that would, what I just have to, we have to be careful with is that will create additional costs for the group, because you're going to actually, I'm not a valuer, so we're going to actually have to employ someone to then try and value those entities, and that will not necessarily be cheap.
But if we have to talk about them, we need to know what they are and whether the debt's appropriate for them, then we need to know something about them. Yeah. And they do belong in here even because this is our strategy. Our strategy is we're a shareholder, what are our shares, DCHL worth, and what's the basis of that, and therefore debt versus, so we know.
Yes.
So just something in about.
So I'm not sure whether that's in the strategy or whether that's actually something you want DCHL to be doing.
I think to achieve anything strategically, we need to start by knowing what it is. So whether it goes in here or whether the strategy is that we look at our debt versus assets, and therefore we have to know what the assets are in that sense, and what they're achieving, those sorts of assets.
Yeah, so I'm just not sure where.
If we put in a strategy that we are looking at whether these are appropriate returns compared with debt or whatever, and to do that, underlying that we have to know what they are.
Right.
Councillor Thompson.
Can I just pick up on something? My good friend and respected colleague, Councillor Vandervis, has inclined at times to the most extraordinary statements, and the question is why I feel the need to respond to them. But can I just pick up on his comment around the assets being liabilities? I think we've got to understand what we are as a business, in inverted commas. We actually are an infrastructure provider. And we get revenue on the basis of people's willingness to be here and pay their share for access to that infrastructure. And so those liabilities that Councillor Vandervis want to reclassify them as, if they weren't there and in the ground, people wouldn't live here. Because to the best of my knowledge, people are just not going to go back to walking on dirt streets and going out to the long drop out the back. So when we talk about these things as liabilities, I think in an accounting sense they are, it's not just in a bookkeeping sense that they're assets. They are the things that we derive our revenue from. Now our revenue might be rates and it might be enforced upon people, But it's nevertheless revenue that we derive out of those assets. So I think it is legitimate to consider our assets, whether they're saleable in the traditional sense, as assets, not just liability. I take the point he's trying to make, that you can't just rip them up and flog them off to someone and turn that into cash. But without the expenditure on those, you don't have the cash.
Councillor Nuth.
Thank you, Worship. I'm just considering the comments that have been made by both Councillor Thompson and Councillor Vandervis, I just wonder whether the abbreviated document is going to sit along.
Deposits in hedges and people's gardens don't cause too much offence. I think there are, of course, problems with a second location, wherever that might be. I'm a bit dubious about the weight of public opinion when, after advertising this proposal, we got 2 submissions in time, one of them from Full Street, and 2 late ones when Mr Saunders went out and prodded Ariki and the school to make a submission, which we have accepted. I think those concerns are natural, and those concerns are one that have to be managed by the council, and I think that's what we should do. I think the motion that's on the table is rather myopic. I look forward to it being defeated and hopefully an extension tried. Any problems that eventuate on the second site properly managed as best we can, and a rational review when it comes back to the end of the trial period about how we cope with this issue that's a very real issue and won't go away because of this decision or any other.
Are there any further speakers before I ask Councillor Staines?
In seconding this motion, I think we don't want to create another version of the problem we already have. It seems to me that we have tried to provide the opportunity for freedom camping in a location where we believe the facilities would enable that to be done in a way in which the community would accept it. It seems to me that we have failed in that. We haven't failed, but the campers that are using it have failed. These people are not going to change. The good campers will be good campers, the bad campers will be bad campers. If you promote an area for freedom camping that is not continually policed, the bad campers are going to continue to be bad campers and the community is going to have to live with it. We do 2 security calls past in a day. All of us around this table know that those 2 security calls that go past are not at a time when we catch the people necessarily who are abusing the privilege. They arrive, we hear later at night after the penguin viewing, the numbers build up. The facilities are right there beside them, but they choose still not to use them. As a council, we've known that the rubbish facilities aren't good enough, but we haven't done anything about that. To me, once you promote an area for freedom camping, it will stay that way for a long time. So I'm saying the trial that we have had going is not working. We made some amendments to it. It appears those are not working. That trial completes at the end of April. Why would we want to create another one for a 4-month period and leave ourselves with that legacy? Our effort needs to go in, I think, to a dock-style camp where there is the ability for 24-hour supervision that will cope with the pressures that are being put on. So I will be voting for this motion.
Councillor Wiley, you want to reply?
The community has shown quite clearly that they do not wish to have Bayfield Park open for 2 people. So I would like everybody to support the community and the community's wishes on this. I think is important, especially with a school, a playground, and sports being played there. And we need to really do need to look further at freedom camping in Dunedin. And I would support staff in looking at that, but Bayfield Park is not the place.
Right, I'm going to put it. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? No. Could I have a show of hands, please? All those in favour of the motion, please raise their hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. It's carried. Now, I'm going to suggest now that we take a 10-minute break. We've been going for just short of 3 hours, and we'll take a 10-minute break and we'll resume at 5 past.
First question is in relation to the Waipori Fund, and I note the commentary around the protection of the capital base and the processes that we have in place in relation to an inflation adjusting fund. And I know that something that's been weighing on the council's mind for about the last 3 or 4 years is the fact that we are not quite at the real value of that fund, and I wonder whether the financial strategy should speak to that and speak to our desire to get back to that point in the near future.
It can. I guess the issue that we have is that the impact that would have on the rates increase. At the end of last year, and I'm just going off the top of my head, I think it was about $4 million short of that. The current financial year, it's doing very well. Touch wood. The issue you have is that one-off impact you're going to have when you...
I'm not advocating that we do it in a one-off, or
yes.
even that we do it this year. I also have, I'm touching wood around the outcome that we have this year, but I guess what I'm seeking is some reference to that process and that ambition and the extent to which we are currently not quite at that target. Because we reference the target and
yes.
the process, but we don't actually acknowledge where we're currently at.
So I guess the issue there is over what time frame do you want it? Because I'd rather not put a statement in there and it says we want to try and achieve it. You need to say we want to try and achieve it within this period.
Maybe that's something for us to consider and make a decision on. But I guess for me, it's not necessarily about articulating a definite target, but acknowledging the fact that we aren't at our current real value, which I think should be in my view, others might have a different view, should be in a document like this. My second question is around, and again, it's just an articulating thing in relation to the target for the investment property portfolio. It speaks to the fact that the draft budgets provide a return on 60%, and that over the next 10 years we'll be seeking to transition towards a target of a return which is greater than the DCC's overall cost of capital. What it doesn't say anywhere in this particular document is that the DCC's overall cost of capital is, and I'm assuming somewhere around 7%. But I think it would be helpful for that to be in one place for the clarity for the reader.
So what we can say there is currently our cost of capital is...
and then
subsequently when the report comes back at the end of the trial, and it's clear from the answers from staff to the questions that the big problem is we have no sanctions, and while the nice security people politely ask people to abide by the rules, some do and some don't, and the people I've spoken to at McHenry Bay say it's sad that one or two inconsiderate people spoil it for the rest. Well, there's nothing new in human behaviour, and that is what happens. The reality is, and as you said the last time we had this conversation in the council committee, these people are camping in their cars, non-self-contained cars, all over the place. They're still going to be doing that, and as Councillor Thompson said, I don't know what the answer either is to whether it's better to try and manage it in the way that our predecessor council did, and this one is following, or whether it's better to turn a blind eye and hope that the deposits in hedges and people's gardens don't cause too much offence. I think there are, of course, problems with a second location, wherever that might be. I'm a bit dubious about the weight of public opinion when, after advertising this proposal, we got 2 submissions in time, one of them from Fallow Street, and 2 late ones when Mr Saunders went out and prodded Ariki and the school to make a submission, which we have accepted. I think those concerns are natural, and those concerns are one that have to be managed by the council, and I think that's what we should do. So
Now, I think the motion that's on the table is rather myopic. I look forward to it being defeated and hopefully an extension tried. Any problems that eventuate on the second site properly managed as best we can, and a rational review when it comes back to the end of the trial period about how we cope with this issue that's a very real issue and won't go away because of this decision or any other.
Are there any further speakers before I ask? Councillor Staines?
In seconding this motion, I think we don't want to create another version of the problem we already have. It seems to me that we have tried to provide the opportunity for freedom camping in a location where we believe the facilities would enable that to be done in a way in which the community would accept it. It seems to me that we have failed in that. We haven't failed, but the campers that are using it have failed. These people are not going to change. The good campers will be good campers, the bad campers will be bad campers. If you promote an area for freedom camping that is not continually policed, the bad campers are going to continue to be bad campers and the community is going to have to live with it. We do 2 security calls past in a day. All of us around this table know that those 2 security calls that go past are not at a time when we catch the people necessarily who are abusing the privilege. They arrive, we hear later at night after the penguin viewing, the numbers build up. The facilities are right there beside them, but they choose still not to use them. As a council, we've known that the rubbish facilities aren't good enough, but we haven't done anything about that. To me, once you promote an area for freedom camping, it will stay that way for a long time. So I'm saying the trial that we have had going is not working. We made some amendments to it. It appears those are not working. That trial completes at the end of April. Why would we want to create another one for a 4-month period and leave ourselves with that legacy? Our effort needs to go in, I think, to a dock-style camp where there is the ability for 24-hour supervision that will cope with the pressures that are being put on. So I will be voting for this motion.
Councillor Wiley, you want to reply?
The community has shown quite clearly that they do not wish to have Bayfield Park open for 2 people. So I would like everybody to support the community and the community's wishes on this. I think it's important, especially with a school, a playground and sports being played there. And we need to really do need to look further at freedom camping in Dunedin. And I would support staff in looking at that, but Bayfield Park is not the place.
Right, I'm going to put it. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? No. Could I have a show of hands, please? All those in favour of the motion, please raise their hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. It's carried. Now, I'm going to suggest now that we take a 10-minute break. We've been going for just short of 3 hours, and we'll take a 10-minute break and we'll resume at 5 past.